Hey, what's up everybody? My name is Moss, and in this video, I want to talk to you about what I think is probably the biggest mistake that I've made in my career, and I'm going to show you how you can avoid making the same mistake. First, I want to give you a little background about where I'm currently at and my past experience. I'm currently a site reliability engineer at a tech company, and I have about 10 years of experience, with a large chunk of it being in IT. My first year out of college, I spent at a company doing IT help desk support. And then after that job, I got an opportunity to move into defense contracting. And I worked in defense contracting for a couple of years, and it was more of a consulting role. It was very non technical, but the function of that job was software configuration management. And when I say software configuration management, I actually don't even mean tools like Ansible or Chef. This was kind of like program management, where you were controlling the releases of software, but from a purely business aspect, where you would go to a change control board and decide whether or not software could be approved to be released to the field. But I had a desire to become more technical, and I wanted to move out of consulting and into ideally a developer role. So I started taking college courses at my local community college for basic like Java programming and basic databases and stuff like that. And I ended up joining an online master's in computer science program that's hosted by Georgia Tech. Right about the time that I got accepted into that master's program, I had an opportunity to move to a new company in a totally different state. And that company was offering more money, and they were also offering a technical position. And it was kind of like a sysadmin, sort of DevOps, like a little bit of DevOps, but mostly system administration. In the first year and second year of that job, I was learning quite a bit. I was learning about basic system administration and basic application monitoring. I also was doing some training on best practices on how to use Git and GitHub for the developers of this company. And that also kind of like led me to creating videos on YouTube as well, that doing that training at that company. But I think after the second year, I stopped progressing technically at that job. I didn't have a lot of opportunities to grow technically into a lot of skill sets that I needed in order to move to a different job. Thankfully, during this time, I was working on my master's degree. So I was growing technically, but from an academic perspective, and not in terms of professional technical experience. And after the second or third year, I had started applying to other companies, and I was targeting not only developer roles, but also I was targeting more senior DevOps roles, DevOps engineering roles. But this is where I started going wrong, I think. I had unrealistic expectations about what kind of job I could get. I was looking for like senior DevOps positions. And so I was interviewing for these roles that I was just unqualified for because they were requiring experience with tools and skills that I had not gotten at my current company at that time, like Kubernetes, and in particular cloud platforms were probably the biggest that I was lacking. And what's unfortunate is that I refused to look for positions that were lower paying and possibly entry level positions, but would have likely gotten me immediate experience with some of those tools. And to give you an example, AWS has a role called AWS support engineers, where the support engineers will obviously support clients that submit tickets through their help center, and the support engineer will troubleshoot the cloud infrastructure. And those support engineer positions were not paying as much as I was getting at my company. And so I didn't want to take a step back financially, and I refused to kind of interview for one of those positions. And I think that was my first big mistake, was not taking a cut then, because if I had gone into a role like a AWS support engineer, I would have had immediate access to a cloud platform. I would have immediately gotten cloud platform experience, and maybe even some other like automation tools that I wasn't getting at my company. And I also felt like those jobs were, entry level jobs. I felt like I was past that. I felt that if I took those jobs, I would be taking a step back. And as I grew further into my career, my pay increased and I moved farther and farther away from a decision to take a lower paying job that I knew would likely improve my technical skills. So this was my first mistake. It was letting the desire for more money get in the way of real technical progression. Now let's talk about my second big mistake. During 2021, I got the opportunity to leave the company that I'd worked for about 5 years and move into a more technical role. It was a DevOps engineering role at a local automotive supplier. And I got the job because I think during that time, during 2021, there was a lot of demand for talent, and it was it was very difficult to hire candidates during that time. And so I think that I got that job because there likely weren't a lot of other candidates available. They might have, legitimately thought that I was qualified as well, but that job gave me a huge pay increase over my prior job. It was a significantly larger pay increase. And I think because of the role that I was hired into and the amount of money that they were paying me, it made me feel like they expected me to know a lot. I felt like I tried to fake my expertise, and there were a lot of times on the job where I wouldn't speak up during a meeting or something because I was afraid that if I said the wrong answer, I would be found out and they would realize I wasn't worth what they were paying me. And this also prevented me from asking questions that I absolutely should have asked. I thought if I asked silly questions that I would again be found out, or maybe the senior engineer on the team would tire of me asking so many questions. So now I was in a situation where my technical expertise and the amount that I was getting paid really didn't align. And it made me someone who was afraid to ask questions and afraid to speak up from fear of being identified as an imposter. And after some time at this job and a brief stint at another job, I started interviewing again for a new role this year. And during the interview process, I interviewed with many companies. I was interviewing for senior DevOps positions as well as senior site reliability engineering roles. And I wasn't able to get offers. I was getting quite a few interviews and I was getting fairly far into the interviews, but I wasn't getting offers. But I finally interviewed with a company who liked me and was willing to move forward to additional interviews after a first round of interviews, but only if I was willing to take a non-senior position. And I asked them, of course, about the pay for a non-senior position, and it was a significant cut in pay from the current role I had at the time. But when I spoke to the hiring manager for this job, I knew without a doubt that I was going to be getting hands-on experience with almost all of the technologies that I had been lacking experience with for so many years. And most importantly, cloud platform experience. I made a difficult decision to pursue technical skills over the never-ending chase for money, and it felt liberating. As soon as I started at my current company, I felt comfortable asking all of the questions. The hiring manager knew exactly how much experience I had and where I lacked experience, so there was nothing to hide. I asked questions and didn't care about looking silly or being found out as an imposter. And you know what? In the first 3 months of this job, I've felt like I've made more progress technically than the last 3 years combined. So now I want to talk to you about how you can avoid making the same mistake that I did and end up stagnating professionally for, several years in your career. The first is about asking questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to look silly because you're asking what you think are basic questions. When I look back at my experience at the company that was paying me a pretty high salary, and I was afraid to ask questions because I thought I was about to be found out for not, operating at the level that they hired me or the pay grade that they hired me at. I really regret not asking questions. I should have asked questions, and I think it would have benefited me more than I realized at that time. If you don't understand how a tool works or how something in Linux works, just ask the question. Don't be afraid to ask questions. This is especially true if you're early in your career, but I think it's even more important as you progress through your career to continue asking questions no matter what. You don't want to present yourself as someone who's a know-it-all or anything like that. You want to, I think it's a problem. I think the problem is ego, right? You have to keep your ego out of the way in order to grow. This also applies to the situation where I had an opportunity to take maybe a more entry level job. It was kind of like taking a step back, but I would have had the opportunity to get experience with tools that were critical for moving forward in my career. So my next piece of advice is to, again, I think this is related to ego, but also your relationship with money as well, because that was also, for me, it was kind of part of the decision to not move to one of these more entry level roles where I would have had hands-on experience with like AWS, for instance. And I think a lot of times people get advised to fake it till you make it. And I don't think it's, always applicable. Sometimes it works in certain areas, it can work. But I think when it comes to hard skills like engineering or computer science, it doesn't, I don't think it's always the best route. You might be able to fake it a little bit, but eventually when you get in like these technical interviews, they know, these are experienced engineers that are interviewing you. The hiring managers who are interviewing you are experienced engineers a lot of the time, and they'll be able to kind of identify whether or not you know what you're talking about. They'll know whether or not you've got experience in those tools or not, like real experience with those tools or not. One thing I'm not trying to say is don't chase money. I mean, I think we all really like having more money and having growth in our salary. I think it's a great thing, but at least in my position, and I think maybe for some of you, you might be in a similar position where you have the opportunity to learn more and you'll grow in your career more technically if you were to go to a specific job than if you just kind of like chased after a higher salary. So don't let money stand in the way, because sometimes money can stand in the way. So that's pretty much all I had for this video. And I hope that, these pieces of advice help you out, help those of you who might be in a similar situation, or maybe you're on a path kind of down the same path that I took. And I hope that I kind of caught you early on enough where it's easy to correct the path. But also, I don't want you to think that like, okay, now I'm smart and I don't make any more mistakes, and from here on out, it's just perfect. I'm going to do everything perfectly. I'm sure I won't. I'm sure I'm going to make more mistakes in the future. But looking back, in retrospect, these are some of the things that I can talk about in retrospect more clearly, and that I would have done differently. So again, I hope this video was helpful. If you enjoyed the video, please consider throwing a like on it and subscribing to the channel for more videos like this. Thanks for watching.